Hello everyone, welcome to our wellness workshop on the stress-free diet. Speaking here is Andrea Lightfoot. I am the manager of our employee wellness program here at Pima College, and we're going to talk about the stress-free diet today. And the presentation is kind of divided into a couple sections. So we know already that stress plays a major role in weight gain. It affects the food choices we make, how hungry we are, how often we eat, and even where on our bodies we gain weight. So we're going to talk about the effects of stress and a little bit about the physiology. And then we're also going to go into somewhat of a lifestyle prescription for you that covers a stress-less or stress-free diet. And I think you'll like it because there are no off-limit foods and there are no calorie restrictions. They're really suggestions for overall lifestyle changes that will help with stress, that will help with weight as well. So let's talk a little bit about diets here. So we know, unfortunately, even though as Americans we spend millions of dollars a year on weight loss plans and products, the truth is diets just don't work. Some diets might work in the short term, they might help you shed some water weight, but it's temporary. And unfortunately, they can lower your metabolism, causing you to gain even more weight later. So most diets are really a temporary solution to a chronic problem. And research shows that most people put back on 80% of the weight within a year. Dieting is also stressful. Trying not to eat is like trying not to breathe. It's just difficult to do. You can't not eat, and your body is going to rebel. Your resistance will weaken. You tend to fall off your diet and feel bad about falling off your diet and feel bad about yourself. So that part of dieting, of course, is no good. Also, it can lead to more emotional eating when we eat to make ourselves feel better. Emotional eating is often caused by stress, and it's the main reason that people eat when they're not hungry. So we're going to talk more about that today. One more thing about diets. You'll see what we're going to talk about today has no restrictions on what you can eat and no foods that are considered off limits. We will talk about some things that are better than others and some things that we might want to limit, but we're not going to put a whole list together of things that you can't eat, which might just cause you stress and cause you to want it more. So when we have the restrictions in place on those other diets, they tend to make us want the restricted foods even more. And unfortunately, we typically fail at trying to do that. So I think you're going to like our definition that we're going to go with of diet today. So we are going with definition number 1A here on the list. Notice it doesn't refer to calorie restrictions at all. What we're looking at really is daily fare. So we're going to talk about what a person should eat on a regular basis. So that's how we're using this word in the title for stress-free diet. So this diet, in addition to focusing on what you eat, we're going to look at how you eat and the role that stress plays in weight gain. And we're going to talk about how stress can affect our willpower, our food choices, our desire to overeat, and sometimes even binge, and how stress plays a role in causing obesity. And we'll also talk about the relationship with exercise, weight management, and stress management. And we'll also address that emotional eating component. So let's talk about stress. So to understand stress, we need to understand the fight or flight response. This evolutionary reaction to danger, more appropriate for the caveman, it was designed for truly life-threatening situations, like a tiger jumping out at you. And when that happens, we experience the stress response today, just like our caveman ancestors. And that stress response is to fight or to run away. So for either of those actions, our bodies are going to change to be ready to fight or run away. So the stress response is designed to help deliver energy to our body so that we have that energy to fight or run away. And that energy is delivered instantly in the form of glucose and fatty acids. So that pumps out into your system and it goes out to your major muscles and organs. And of course, if we were in a truly stressful situation, a fight or flight, we would need that. Unfortunately, in today's world, we don't have tigers jumping out at us. This physiological response doesn't necessarily help us today, but unfortunately, our bodies haven't really adapted. So in our daily world, our bodies don't really know the difference between a tiger jumping out at us and all of the other stressful things we experience in this modern world, like deadlines, traffic, and family, work, life issues. But when all of those minor things happen today, our bodies still go into that same fight or flight response, and we have the same physiological reaction. And you may have experienced this too. Some of the changes might be your heart beating a little bit faster, some tenseness. So if you have a deadline and you feel your muscles tightening up, or someone pulls in front of you in traffic and you feel your heart beating faster, that just gives you an example of how you experience that fight or flight today. So if we experience this over and over again, we've learned our bodies instantly and now continuously pump out these glucose and fatty acids into our system. So when this response is triggered, glycogen, which is stored energy, you can see that in the picture, turns into glucose, and also known as blood sugar energy, and it's delivered through the bloodstream to help fuel the muscles and major organs so that we could fight or flee. But of course, our body's muscles and organs don't need the fuel because we're not going to go and fight or run away. So all of that high octane energy, glucose and fatty acids, has to go somewhere, has to go back into storage. And if you wanted to guess, you probably could figure out where we're going. That extra energy is converted into fat, and it is stored right in your midsection. So a lot of research has shown the relationship between stress and belly fat, also known as visceral fat. And this particular type of fat has a lot of significant health consequences. It grows in and around the major organs. It crowds out the heart, which can lead to higher blood pressure. It can lead to higher insulin levels and make a person more likely to develop diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, heart disease, even certain types of cancer. The amount of visceral fat or belly fat you have is directly linked to the amount of stress you experience. So you may have heard of Dr. Oz. He and another doctor a test in a recent book that the best way to tell how stressed you are is to take a look at your belly and basically how big it is. The larger your waist size, the higher your level of stress. It's believed that that visceral fat versus the subcutaneous fat that you can see in the picture is the true culprit of many of the diseases that are linked to obesity. And if you look at that picture, you can really see how that belly or visceral fat is more internal and really starts to push up against the organs. So people with a lot of belly fat or visceral fat typically are known as an apple shape. And that is a key indicator of potential health consequences in the future. So a waist size of over 40 inches for men or 35 inches for women puts you at a greater risk for diabetes, heart disease, all those things that we listed earlier. Now, some people actually carry their weight around their hips, thighs, and buttocks, and they're known perhaps as pear-shaped, and that's that subcutaneous fat, so not the belly fat building up around the organs. This fat, although it's not particularly healthy if it gets too much, but it's not necessarily related to stress. So a low-tech way to tell, are you an apple-shaped or a pear-shaped, is your fat from stress or from something else? Again, you can just measure around your belly. And if you are over, again, 35 inches for a woman or 40 inches for a male, you'll get an idea of the potential cause of your shape. So in addition to determining how your fat is stored, stress also affects your appetite. Short-term stress, also known as acute stress, decreases the appetite and increases the metabolism. Long-term stress, also known as chronic stress, increases the appetite and decreases the metabolism. And you'll see the hypothalamus there controls appetite as well as that fight or flight response. If we look at what happens in our body in an evolutionary perspective, what happens with our appetite and our metabolism makes sense. So if we needed to survive a drought or a famine, and there was a chronic, so that would be chronic stress, similar to what we experience today, where that stress is ongoing in and out every day, our body goes into a fat storage mode. So the brain tells the body to burn less calories and also to eat whatever it can find. On the other hand, in order to survive a sudden attack, your appetite would actually shut down. So the decrease in appetite and an increase in metabolism. So typically, again, if we were experiencing that acute stress, fight or flight, we would actually burn all of that off in our reaction. However, we don't necessarily do that today. But here's the good news. We can take this information and use it to our advantage and use it to help control our appetite, burn more calories, and help control our weight. Exercise has the same effect on your body as short-term or acute stress. And if you think about it, it makes sense because exercise is, in a way, a stressor to the body. So when we experience that acute stress, it revs up our metabolism and it dulls our appetite. If you wanted to experiment on this, if you've ever, if you're hungry and you go out for a jog, your hunger typically goes away while you're jogging. It returns potentially afterwards, but your appetite just kind of disappears when you're in that mode. On the other hand, skipping meals has the effect of chronic stress, where it lowers your metabolism and increases your appetite. So it's important not to go more than 12 hours without a meal, because when we go beyond that time frame, our bodies experience that chronic stress. And then our metabolism goes down, and it can go down as much as 40%. So if you happen to be a person who regularly skips breakfast and are having a hard time losing weight, you know why. Your body's natural chronic stress response is kicking in and slowing down your metabolism. So if you do happen to skip breakfast, now is a good time to think about how you can change that. It doesn't mean you have to have a huge formal breakfast. It just means eat something to tell your body that you're not in starvation or famine mode, that it's okay for it to burn calories. And there's some examples on the screen there. If you wanted to just even have a few nuts, or maybe a whole food smoothie that you put together, something to rev up your metabolism. So let's move on a little bit and talk about emotional eating. So in addition to playing havoc with our appetite and our metabolism, when we're stressed, we tend to seek out comfort foods that remind us of the foods our parents gave us when we did something good, or maybe something bad happened to us. And as a result of this childhood conditioning, we will tend to reach for things like ice cream or chips or candy to kind of console ourselves. That particular reaction, when it happens, is a type of emotional eating. Emotional eating causes us to eat when we feel depressed or anxious, bored, or lonely. Since we're not usually truly hungry, like stomach hungry, when we eat emotionally, sometimes we call this as a mouth hunger. So learning how to control emotional eating begins with awareness. Most of us don't realize how often we reward ourselves with food or try to make ourselves feel better with food. So it's important to start with that first awareness step. And one way to do that is with a mood food journal. And that is a handout that I emailed out to everyone prior to the program. You'll see that journal is a little bit different than a traditional food journal where you're writing down everything you eat. But this is meant to be used when you're eating kind of unscheduled food. So if normally you plan to eat breakfast, lunch, afternoon snack, and dinner, if you find yourself eating any other time throughout the day, you would want to use this journal, write it down, figure out what you ate, where, why, what was going on, and use that journal to help you determine if emotional eating is going on, and perhaps you already know that, and then you can begin to define it and learn what your triggers are. So again, that handout is in the email. Related to this, I want to talk about emotional eating quiz. So this is in the other handout that we sent out to you. And you can take a moment to read through the questions. Do you eat when you come home from work? Do you eat when you get into an argument? Do you eat at certain times of the day, especially if you feel rushed? Do you eat standing up or right out of the package? Do you like to eat when you are anxious, upset, or lonely, or depressed? If any of those strike to you a yes answer, that is an indication that there's some type of emotional eating going on. And so again, that first step is awareness. So we talked about this mood food journal. And I want to talk a little bit more about that stomach versus mouth hunger, because you may find throughout the day that there's just times that you're feeling like you want something, like it's 2 in the afternoon and you want chocolate. But if you listen to yourself, you're not actually hungry. Your stomach isn't hungry. Your mouth is hungry. And that's really some type of an emotional response that's happening. So that would be something great you could write down on your journal, figure out if it's actually a certain time of day that's a trigger, or if it's certain things that happen. Another thing we want to look at is if we're self-medicating with food. So when we eat emotionally, we're typically doing that. And foods do affect our moods. And on the other side, our moods affect what we eat. There's even some research out there that shows we reach for crunchy foods when we're angry, sugary foods when we're depressed, soft, sweet foods when we're anxious, and salty foods when we're stressed. So if you keep your journal, you can maybe pinpoint if there are certain emotions and certain foods that you're craving, or maybe you even know now that you've thought about this, what's going on. We also tend to self-medicate with carbs. So sugary foods, sometimes known as simple carbs, like cupcakes or pasta or white bread, those are actually the most commonly used foods for self-medicating. And there's a reason behind that. These foods give us an instant lift. And that's part of why we crave them when we're stressed. The white flour and the sugar in the food are quickly converted into glucose in our bloodstream. So the quickness with which foods are converted into glucose is what makes them so alluring. Unfortunately, we do pay a price for that quick lift. So when the brain realizes, oh, there's all of this sugar, there's too much, maybe you've even experienced that sugar high, it tells your pancreas to release insulin into the bloodstream, which helps to neutralize the excess glucose, helps it get into storage cells. But when your sugar level continues to get high and you experience the low afterwards, we tend to crave more sugar and more carbs. So when we're comforting ourselves with these simple carb foods, we send ourselves into this kind of up and down cycle of craving more food. Again, we're craving junk food and eating that. And that cycle is also very stressful on the body, both short-term and long-term. And it can cause us to feel sluggish. And it can also lead to what's known as insulin resistance. And this is basically something that we want to avoid because it is a precursor to diabetes. So obviously, that whole cycle is not the best option for us. So if you find that you are craving sugary foods or high carb foods like bagels, or maybe it's chips, remember that there's probably something emotional going on, and it's usually an attempt to nurture yourself to help you manage your stress. In the long run, if you give in to the cravings, you're causing more stress and creating that vicious cycle we talked about. So we want to avoid those highs and lows and find other ways to nurture ourselves that don't involve eating. And so there are different alternatives that we can put in place when we find that we are experiencing emotional eating. So it could be substituting a different behavior. So if you identify a trigger in your life, like you come home at the end of the day and you just go straight to the kitchen and start eating or pour yourself a drink or something along those lines, if you identified that, you can not even go to the kitchen, but go directly to do something else. You might go for a walk, or you might spend some quiet time in your car before you go into the house to help de-stress yourself. It could be, we'll show a slide in a little bit, something like taking a bath. But whatever it is, you want to identify first what's happening, that there is some emotional eating going on. So then you can plan ahead what you're going to do instead. On your emotional eating quiz, one of the things mentioned was eating out of the packages, like standing up, and that might be you're coming home at the end of the day and just grabbing something, or it could be you're feeling rushed, so you just eat it right out of the package. That, of course, the easy way to stop that is perhaps you still go ahead and eat, but you take whatever it is and put it in a bowl and go sit in another room and have more of a quiet time. The more you become aware of emotional eating patterns, the more you can do to stop them or limit them and plan something different, do something different. Another alternative, instead of doing something different, you might plan ahead, for some healthy snacks. And carrot sticks, celery, crunchy foods can be really helpful if you're wanting that. If you're wanting something creamy, a handful of nuts or some cantaloupe might be good. The nuts are nice because they have that creaminess in them. But any other healthy food substitute that you can plan to have on hand and use when you get that trigger will help you stay on track. Some people actually do really well by having a glass of water instead of eating anything when they're feeling stress. And again, we might choose to do any of those alternative items like reading or walking, gardening. And then another option that works for some people is to choose a bigger reward and to actually, for example, put a quarter in a jar every time you avoid emotional eating, or when you choose to take that healthy snack instead, or choose to go for a walk instead. And then at the end of the month, or when the jar is full, you can get yourself a big reward. So you actually reward yourself for behaving in a healthful way. And that serves as a nice visual along the way. So again, once you identify those stressful triggers, you can plan a strategy, whether it's doing something different or eating something different, to help get you through that. So we're going to talk now about the lifestyle prescription piece of the stressful diet. So as I said at the beginning, it's not about a traditional, version of dieting, because most people put the weight back on, and dieting can do so much more harm than good. The key to managing your weight is to really look at permanent lifestyle changes. And the more lifestyle changes you incorporate, the more likely your body will return to a healthy weight for you. And we'll go through a number of different things that we want to get into practicing on a regular basis. And all of these things can help in general with stress management, and they definitely help with weight management as well. So specific to the weight management, a great thing that we can do is work to raise our metabolism. And FYI, drinking green tea has been shown to raise metabolism. It might even be one reason why Japanese who drink green tea every day don't have an obesity epidemic. Another very proven way, though, to raise metabolism is by doing a bit of strength or resistance training every day. For example, just 5 minutes a day can help put muscle back onto your body that diminishes with age, or it can help you keep your muscle. And it's important to have muscle because every pound of muscle burns extra calories every day on our body. And for the majority of us, once we are past the age of 30, we start losing muscle mass every year unless we're doing something to keep it. So the picture here shows some very light weights. I would definitely suggest heavier weights than that. But it doesn't mean you have to go to a gym and use free weights or machines, although that's definitely an option. But you can do some body weight exercises like squats and push-ups, crunches or plank, things that you're using the weight of your body to provide some resistance to the muscles. Or you might use a fitness band or resistance band, like the ones that we give out sometimes in our fitness challenges and at other events. So again, it's just important to keep muscle, knowing that that really helps to burn calories every day, or to build muscle back on, which will help to raise our metabolism. So on the screen, it says counting calories, but we're not actually going to suggest that you write down every single calorie that you eat and try to calculate it. It's more about awareness. So beginning to understand how many calories you actually need in a day, how many you actually burn, and then getting an idea of some of the foods out there that you commonly eat, or if you're going someplace new, looking at the menu to get an idea, because that awareness will help typically with making healthier choices. For example, you can see a quick calculation on the screen of how many calories you burn every day at rest. And since most of us have some activity, it might be a little bit more than what you see there, but that would give you an idea of how much you burn. So for example, a 150-pound person potentially burns 1,500 calories a day, possibly a little bit more if that person is more active. So if you know that you need 1,500 calories and you go out and look at a menu and see that large bagel has 500 calories and the milkshake with your fast food lunch has 1,000 calories, that's 1,500 calories in just 2 items, barely a breakfast and only a piece of lunch. So that awareness might help us realize, okay, we really are eating way too many calories, and we want to look at some different options. Now, for some people, they can benefit greatly by counting, calories all day throughout the day. But in general, if you just get an idea of what your personal diet consists of and what your personal metabolism looks like, it should help you begin to make healthier choices down the line. Another great way to manage your weight and also help with stress is to eat whole foods. That would be things like salad, vegetables, foods that are in their natural state, as close to their natural source, versus sugary, salty, processed foods. So a whole food would be a food either in its original state, like a carrot or an apple, or something close to it. For example, we're not going to eat the rice right off the field. We do need to mill it to get the rice, but we want that whole brown rice grain. Versus further away from whole might be, a whole wheat or a brown rice cracker. So we want to go towards closest to that natural source. So those types of foods really help fill you up. They're nutrient dense and they have fewer calories, and they stop some of those cravings. You typically aren't going to experience those highs and lows that we saw earlier when we eat those high sugar carbs. And a lot of these foods just taste really good. Like if you have an apple and it's really good, afterwards you probably aren't craving, a bunch more apples or something else. Whereas when you eat junk food or processed foods, you tend to not feel satisfied. You tend to want more, like the bag of chips or Doritos. You can't just eat a few, you have to eat the whole bag. Versus if you have a bowl of strawberries, you really can only eat so many strawberries before you're full, and you feel full and satisfied. And if you ate a whole giant bowl of strawberries, you're a lot better off than eating a giant bag of chips, of course. So when we eat those nutrient-dense foods, they help support our entire body, including our immune system and all of our functioning, so that when we are experiencing a lot of stress, it can help us get through that. And I'll just put out an example. If you think about 2 different days at work, and one day you kind of skip lunch, you go to the vending machine, grab some chips and a soda, and you eat that at your desk. The next day or a different day, you actually maybe even went out to lunch but had some tacos, some corn tortilla tacos, like a couple of those, maybe 3, maybe had a piece of fruit, had some water to go along with it. And you compare those days. If someone came to you with a deadline project that you had to get done like right away, then and there, you would do much better in handling that stressful situation if you had had the real whole food for lunch versus a bunch of processed junk. So eat whole foods. Another thing we can look at in the weight and stress management equation is eliminating liquid calories. In the American diet, the average American diet, 22% of total calories are still coming from sodas, juices, alcoholic beverages. Ideally, we drink lots of water, which has 0 calories. And of course, hydration, again, helps support our bodies and makes us more resilient to stress. If you do drink sugary beverages, know that if you cut out just 1 can of Coke a day, that could take off 15 pounds of weight in a year if you didn't make any other changes. So that's an easy one for weight management if you are still consuming some of these calorie-filled beverages. And instead, of course, we want to drink plenty of water. So carry it around with you. If you want to flavor it with some fruit essence, or maybe drink some sparkling seltzer water, again, something plain, no calories or artificial sweeteners added to it, that will help also make us feel full throughout the day. Sometimes we feel hungry when we're actually thirsty. So drinking some water, if you're feeling like you might be hungry, can sometimes help in that equation as well. Another piece to the stress and weight management equation is sleeping 7 to 8 hours a night. If you get fewer than 7 hours on average, you are officially sleep deprived. No matter how long you have been getting by on less, you are sleep deprived. We had our 30-day sleep challenge program, and if you missed out on the great information in that, look for it to come out again so that you can get more information, tips, and tools to help you work towards that 7 to 8 hours of sleep. That really helps you get relaxed And it really helps with your immune system, and it helps you deal with stress. Anything less than that 7 hours a night is going to make you vulnerable to stress, fatigue, anxiety, depression. And not getting enough sleep also increases the likelihood of emotional eating. So we also have some stress management action items. And we're going to review the 5 that you see on here. So with the exception of exercising, and of course we've talked about those benefits, all of the other activities help bring out the relaxation response, which is the complete opposite of the fight or flight response. So practicing things like the deep breathing, yoga, and meditation can actually turn the stress response off in your body. So we'll touch on exercise just for another moment because it is just so important. Exercise is truly an integral part of a stress-free diet. By releasing feel-good chemicals, also known as endorphins, your body gets an instantaneous lift. Regular exercise helps lower stress, it burns calories, and it decreases the chances of heart disease, diabetes, stroke, certain cancers. If all of the benefits of exercise were available in a pill, everyone would take it. So what we should strive for is that goal of 150 minutes a week. So kind of 30 minutes of exercise most days. It doesn't have to be super exercise. You don't have to get out and run. It can be, as simple as going for a walk. On a side note, if you are not looking at your nutrition or working on exercise at the moment, if you take on both of these at the same time, they work very well together, and people are much more likely to lose weight and keep it off by doing both of these components. Our next tip is deep breathing, and it's literally that simple. It's taking a deep breath in and exhaling out. Now, it's important that we breathe deeply, also known as belly breathing. And to do that, you could take one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly. Breathe in so that you feel your belly rise and flatten as you breathe out. Deep breathing helps to slow the heart rate. It increases oxygen consumption. And again, it turns that stress response off. So this can be just literally taking a moment, breathing deeply, or taking several and practicing that throughout your day. Progressive muscle relaxation is another great technique. It means tensing a muscle and relaxing it, kind of one at a time. So you would start at your head and move down your body, closing your eyes and breathe, and you go through one part at a time and tense and release. So for example, if you take your fist right now, make a fist, inhale, exhale, release, and then tighten your forearm, inhale, exhale, and release, and then make a fist, tighten your forearm and your upper arm and your shoulder, and then as you exhale, relax, release. You might feel a difference between each side. Tensing a muscle helps us to relax it more. However, if that doesn't work well for you, you can also kind of go through your body one part at a time in your mind and just think about that area relaxing. And you could do this too if you just feel stressful tension like in your shoulders and your back. Work on that area just for a few moments, and that will help to release some of the tension in that area. Another great technique to incorporate is yoga, which means union of mind and body. It combines meditation, breathing, and stretching all together. And you don't have to go to a studio to practice yoga or a class. You can fit in a routine at home or even at your desk. If you're able to practice something like Tai Chi or Qigong, that's another very similar practice that can give you a lot of the same benefits. Another wonderful stress reduction technique is meditation. And it does require some extra attention and patience. It is something that we need to practice to get a little bit better at. The goal in meditation is to calm the body by focusing the mind on a single word or phrase you repeat silently to yourself. Or it could be focusing on something like your breath. You don't have to be in a special position to meditate. You can do it anytime, anywhere. And it's just a matter of closing your eyes, breathing slowly in, breathing slowly out. And the key here is trying to slow down all of those thoughts that are running through our mind all of the time, so we can bring our focus back to our breath as those thoughts come in if we're trying to meditate, or we can choose a word or a phrase and continue to repeat that and focus on that in our mind. That can help keep out some of those other thoughts. Sometimes counting in meditation can work well, counting your breath. Or you can perhaps choose an app on your phone or on your computer that has a guided meditation with music. But regardless, that meditation practice, again, is going to help turn the stress response off. But also regular meditation practice helps overall. So it makes your body and mind more resilient to stress. And so when you experience it, you're stronger. It doesn't affect you as much. So in this workshop, we've talked about how stress plays a major role in weight gain, how it affects the food choices we make, how hungry we are, how often we eat, and even where on our body we gain weight. So we're not recommending a specific diet because unfortunately that can lead to weight gain or more stress. We recommend managing your stress levels. In general, working on that calorie balance, maybe going a little bit deeper. And then going back to that emotional eating. So if you're finding that you have certain triggers that cause the emotional eating, put one of those strategies in place. So choosing different foods or choosing a different action or choosing a reward system. But all of that first requires awareness and some planning ahead so that it's easy to make that healthy choice. And if you're first starting out with that, remember that it's not always easy. And it's okay if you don't make the healthy choice one day, you can make it the next time. And then think about those overall stress management and weight management techniques. So if you practice that lifestyle prescription on an everyday basis, that will help manage your stress and your weight overall. So I thank you for joining this online workshop today on the stress-free diet. Again, you have the handouts in the email. And if you have any follow-up questions or comments, feel free to send an email directly to me, alightfoot@pima.edu, or send to pcc-wellness@pima.edu. Thank you for joining the workshop today, and I hope you found a little nugget to take back with you and put in place. Have a great rest of your day.